Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 159. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and here in the city of Philadelphia, we have a very, very, very special guest, Kim Harari. Kim, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've got two giant cups of coffee in front of me that you can't see. They're off camera.
Amazing.
Little tired, but I know that's something we share in common because you were telling me about how you napped today.
Absolutely.
And I was telling you how naps are hard for me because it makes me feel really vulnerable. Something about falling asleep in the middle of a day while the sun is still out just feels like I don't know. It feels odd to me, and it's a skill I would like to develop. So why don't we start with this? Any tips to falling asleep in the middle of the day?
Well, my first tip would be not to drink 2 cups of coffee at 6:30 p.m. And how not to fall asleep or how to fall asleep as he takes.
How to fall asleep?
Well, I'm the type of person that I can sit right here and put my head down and pass out for 20 minutes and wake up and feel refreshed. But I don't know, I guess like quiet the mind. Throw a little meditation on, just like zone out, close your eyes. But sometimes I'm busy and overthinking and on the go and like have momentum, and then it's really hard to pause. But when I'm exhausted, it's pretty easy to, get a little snuggly and shut my eyes. But it's been a talent of mine since I've been very young. So yeah. I don't know.
Well, I admire that. And before we make anybody else fall asleep listening to this, I figured, why don't we introduce you and then we'll dive into your story. So, Kim, if you had to introduce yourself to people listening who don't know who you are, how would you do that?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I would say I'm Kim, and first thing that comes to mind is I would say what I do, right? But I guess just introducing myself, I would say my name, my age. I'm 31 years old. I was not born in this country. And I live in Philly, and that's pretty much it. That's what I try to do now instead of just go and say, I'm a personal trainer and have a personal training business, because then, it opens a door more for a conversation like, where are you from? And then it's, what do you do? And then, you kind of go from there. But if I immediately go to what I do, then the whole conversation becomes about what I do,
And you're so much more than just fitness. And I know that because we got connected in a tangible way through the 2024 Project Endure event. And then that led to us meeting up for coffee, which led to a multi-hour conversation in a coffee shop about your life story, which had me on the edge of my seat. And I'm smiling because there's so much to talk about. And because we were sitting next to this, I think it was like a father-daughter or father-son, like a real little kid. And you're telling me your life story and it's so unfiltered, just like raw. And at one point we had to move over so we were further away from the kid to protect their ears. But I'm so excited to have you share your story on the podcast. And with that being said, I figured we would just jump right in, and I'll lead with kind of the first big question and we'll see where it takes us. So when you look back at your 31 years of life so far, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
So this is a great question, and when I was thinking about it earlier, it's, I where I'm at today, right, on a daily basis, before I get into that, like I try to take accountability and responsibility for all of my actions, right? Good, bad, and indifferent. I wouldn't even say bad, right? But so I'm recovering from drug addiction, right? Which to me, drug addiction encompasses any mood or mind altering substance. And I was questioning, did I choose to do it? Did I not choose to do it? And um, you did bring up a good point, right? So I grew up playing soccer, right? And I got hurt. Soccer was like my everything. It was my first relationship, I would say, right? It's my first passion and my first like attachment, right? Because I didn't know who I am or who I was at 15, 16, 17, right? And it made me feel so good. So I developed like a little bit of an attachment to it. And I got hurt, right? I had ankle surgery and I was prescribed opioids, right? Which I did not choose at the moment. I wasn't like, hey, doc, let me get oxys. I didn't know what they were. My family didn't know what they were. It wasn't talked about much the way it is now. We weren't told it's addictive. Um, and that kind of progressed, right, into like a spiral for the past, you know, since I was 17, for about 13 years of being in and out of drug addiction, using, drinking, using, getting clean, putting together clean time. So when I was 16, I got prescribed opioids. And I was playing soccer and I was so depressed when I injured myself because that was my entire identity, right? And my family was just divorced. My parents got divorced, and it's everybody's family is dysfunctional in some shape, way, or form. So I'm not like, whoa, it's me at all. Our parents do the best with what they have and what they know at the time. And but with that, like the only thing that I felt good enough at for both my mom and dad was soccer, right? Had a hard time paying attention in school. I was a class clown, had the ADHD, the addictive personality. I wanted to make everybody laugh. And so my grades were like tragic, right? But soccer was incredible for me, right? The way it made me feel, the way I played. And I confidently felt that about myself. Like I wasn't confident about anything else. When I moved to the US, I couldn't speak English. I had this very big head of ginger hair, you know. So I just felt very different. And I was Jewish. And so I kept separating myself from everybody. But when I got a chance to play soccer, I didn't have to talk to anybody, right? All you would say is here, here, or yo, or Eddie. I get the ball, reach your hand, and I was good at it, and I got respect for it. So then when I got injured, I kind of lost all that, and then was prescribed opioids. So when I first took them, I was like, oh, this feels nice, right? Like it shuts my brain off. I'm not too, I was kind of like present, but not present, if that makes sense, right? So like the anxiety of the future and playing in college dissipated, and the anxiety of like all the stuff that I'm not good enough at other than soccer in the past, right, dissipated. And not that I was present with my thoughts and feelings and emotions, but I was just in the here and now without any thoughts, emotions, or feelings other than relief, right? So it kind of killed two birds with one stone. It helped with the pain physically and then emotionally and mentally, right? Because I've always been an overthinker. I'd always obsess about things. And, today, if I channel it appropriately, it could be a blessing. And if I struggle doing that, then, it's not as much of a blessing, but it gives me more of an opportunity to kind of grow, and get better at that. So I just started hanging out with the wrong crowd, getting high a lot, partying on the weekends, then partying on the weekdays. And I used to be the girl who sat in biology class before I got hurt and the kid behind me would be like, yo, we're going to smoke weed after school. And I was like offended that they would ask me, right? My identity was like, if you asked me who I was then or introduce yourself, I'd say, hi, I'm Kim, I'm a soccer player. Like that was it, period. Nothing else. So I was like, I don't do that. I play soccer, you know? And there was a drinking. And I was like, no, I'm never going to drink, and it became where I was the person being like, hey, I'm going to go cop some drugs after school. Let's go do it. And people were like, we got homework to do, Um, and at that point, at 17, I didn't really, I thought that using was a direct result of my life, right? So I kind of felt like a victim, which we've talked about before, right? Like I've always been different. My parents are divorced. My mom's never around. I had a bunch of different nannies growing up that would leave like every 9 months if we were nutty, growing up as kids. And yeah, it just never felt a part of the, family dynamics did get a little more dysfunctional after the divorce. And I was like, this is why I keep getting high, and of course I hurt my ankle and I kept hurting it and my anxiety and this and that, but not for a second did I think, okay, my life is becoming unmanageable because I can't stop getting high, right? So like that's where I didn't choose to have to handle this, right? But because of the unmanageability, I was forced to at a very young age, not necessarily by choice, right? In a blackout, I told my mom everything that I'm doing, that I need help at 17. Didn't remember that I did that. Ended up in rehab the next week, right? And I just said, okay, because I just didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, but I didn't know what recovery meant either. I thought I could smoke weed on the weekends, drink, do a little bit of coke here and there, right? Which sounds insane to your average person, right? And I said this podcast is going to get raunchy, and we haven't even started with a raunchy, but so maybe this will hook the listeners in a little bit more. But no, but yeah, man, I didn't, know what it meant at all. And I remember when they were like, no, like you can't use any mood or mind altering substances a day at a time, hopefully for the rest of your life, or your life is just going to get worse. And I just couldn't grasp that until I had like 90 days at that rehab. And I remember I was like, oh my God, I haven't done any drugs in 90 days. I haven't had a drink. Granted, I was in a facility. I could have left because I turned 18 there. I actually graduated high school there. And so I ended up being there for 4 months. And then they shipped me out to a halfway house in North Jersey, and in the middle of nowhere with 14 different women. And it kind of just taught me how to live life, right? So it's like a step down for treatment. And that's where it's a daily decision now. So we also talked about when I'm clean and I have, at least 30, 60, 90 days removed from the drug, right, or substance, I have a clear enough mind to where if I'm making a conscious decision if I choose to get high, no matter what the circumstances in my life, right? So if somebody dies, if I go through a breakup, if I don't have money from stress, anxiety, somebody gets sick, whatever, I'm still making that conscious decision to pick up, right? But the very first time, once I got the opioids, I did not ask the doctor for those opioids, right? I just did what he told me. And then, the addiction kind of starts running you. But at that point, I didn't know that addiction was like a disease or, your brain rewires itself and all this like fascinating, but, not the best way type of chemical imbalance that gets created, right? So I think it is fascinating how the brain rewires itself, right? And there's people that do have an addictive personality or, and a addictive predisposition in their genes because of family members that struggle with the disease of addiction, that just never used, right? And so that they've learned, hopefully, to channel their addiction in more positive ways, right? Um, do I keep going, or are you going to keep asking me questions?
No, this is great. I want to interrupt your story for just a second. I have a few questions, and then we'll continue with it because I know there's so much more. So there's a quote from Helen Keller that I'll read, and then I have a question. So she said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved." Do you feel like, in any way, shape, or form, that first experience with opioids and everything that has transpired since has made you a stronger, more motivated, better human being in any way, shape, or form?
Absolutely. I think it presented, so already, like, you can't be happy without, you can't experience happiness without experiencing like sadness, right? Um, and I was actually talking to somebody today, and they were like, "It's really hard being a human, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's also fucking wonderful." Am I allowed to cuss?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Perfect, perfect. You could bleep it out if not, but that would be a lot of editing. So, and I said you can't really have one without the other, though, right? So, yeah, I think being having the history of being an addict, and I still say I'm an addict. I'm just in recovery, right? Because that's never going to change. I'm not an actively using addict, right? Just for today. Um, but I think it's with addiction comes certain behaviors and patterns in a lifestyle, right, that are super negative, and then it forces you to either grow or like literally die, right? So I think by the grace of the universe or whatever you choose to believe in, luck, I don't really think it's like luck. Um, I think it's just I've been blessed with opportunities to just crack open a different door that was always cracked open, right? And I think I always have a bunch of doors cracked open. And sometimes it's easier to push one than the other, but usually the one that's a little harder is the one where, I grew up from. So I do think it has helped me develop a stronger character for sure. And with that also, you develop, like, I think, more ways to try and distract yourself as well, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I also, so I have a question on something you said because, right, being a human is hard. And on this podcast, I think there's a big bias of people who take hard things and choose to grow through them, right? Those are the kind of conversations I want to have, but I also want to acknowledge that there are plenty of people who go through the same hard things that we talk about on these episodes and they're crushed by them. They don't make it through. They play victim for the rest of their lives. It doesn't end up well. So, yes, you can't have strength without struggle. You can't become resilient without the resistance. But in your eyes, what's the character trait or what are the qualities that allowed you to turn this hard thing into something greater, into something eventually positive beyond just maybe luck or opportunity? Because there's clearly something inside of you that's allowed this hardship to become positive.
Um, that's a compliment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Blushing on the other side of the camera. No, but so I, you know, and even now I'm like, well, I don't want to like toot my own horn, right? And the first thing that came to mind is community and the power of community, right? And growing up, yes, I was like a very fiery kid. If I wanted something, I figure out how to get it, right? Like nothing could stand in my way. If I wanted the pacifier, that's in the upper cabinet. I'd stack chairs. I'd stand up. I'd fall, get back up, and I get the pacifier, right? And so I don't know if I was born with that character, right? I had My parents were very hardworking growing up, so I saw that. Um, and I did have the experience. Somebody tried to come in. I did have the, you know, experience of like failing and trying, right? So from a young age, I was forced to try and adapt, right? Like moving here to the States, and again, not speaking English and learning how to play the sport. And I think for me, it was like the reference point of, wow, I feel safe on the soccer field, right? So that kind of gave me like, okay, I can figure this world out, right? Not that I like made that conscious like awareness when I was 8 years old, but yeah, and I think I'm just the type of person where I've always had a zest for life, especially like the little corny things. Um, I love a nice car, but like that doesn't do it for me. It might when I buy the car, and then when I, you know, get it at a car wash and clean it, then it's exciting. But like that's about it, right? I'm over it the next day. And for me, I didn't have much of a choice, right? So as an addict, um, I saw what it does to other people. I was able to reflect and see what it did to my life just at 17 years old, ending up in treatment, right? It says it in and of itself. And I got a taste, right, of like real connection with community, right? So, like an intimate, platonic, vulnerable relationship with another human being that sees past my addiction can relate to the feelings behind it, right? And the struggle. They don't have to be doing drugs to relate to the feeling of like despair and hopelessness and being not good enough and all that type of stuff. And that was so like astonishing to me, right? That I was able to feel safe in another human's presence. And it wasn't just on the soccer field, right? And that felt really good. So I was like, this feels better than that. And I want this. So I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to maintain this, you know? And, now fast forward a little bit, I'm sure we'll backtrack, but having the experience of having years clean and relapsing and my addiction, like totally progressing and taking a turn and going to jail and all that, which we can touch on, and getting out and being able to get clean again, I have the mindset of I literally can do whatever the fuck I want in this lifetime, right? Like there's no rules, like we said. Like let's not run red lights and like rob people, you know what I mean? Or cause harm, but there's like no rules, right? Going to college is not a rule, right? We grow up thinking it is. So, and it's so freeing to kind of have that mindset. But also with that mindset, you've had to have like limiting beliefs, right? At some point in your life. And those don't just go away. But again, if I look back at experiences, I'm like, I can do it, right? And then you can make the decision to do like you do, right? Harder things. Or like, I'm going to make a decision to do this hard thing and run a mile every day for, I don't know how many days you're going to do it, but we're just doing it,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also beautiful that you're able to choose to do hard things and you don't just have to do hard things because they're kind of given to you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I have two thoughts, and then we'll use this to segue back into your story. One is a quote from Confucius, who said, "Every man has two lives, and the second starts when he realizes he has just one." And I think we have these moments or these times in our life where we have moments of clarity, right? We come to these realizations, and part of your realization, it sounds like, at least the first part or one of the parts, is understanding or realizing that you weren't in control anymore at a certain point. And I'm going to reference episode 139 of this podcast with Caleb McCoy. Incredible human, incredible story. Uh, Also an addict, recovering addict. He's been clean for a while. And in his episode, he talked a lot about how he always thought he was in control. And he would just say, I'll never get to that level. And he would point to someone who had it worse. And he'd say, I'll never do that. Right. And then he would do that. And then he would say, he'd pick something else. And he'd say, I'd never do that. And then he found himself in a bathroom with his son knocking on the door and him shooting up with heroin. And he realized he was at that rock bottom, one of his rock bottoms. And so my point here is you realize at some point that you're powerless over this. And you go get help and you're in treatment, you're clean, you're 17. What happens from there?
So I get out, I go to this recovery house. I stay clean there for a year, excuse me, and I meet this guy, right? Now, before I get into this guy, I I'm queer, right? I identify as a lesbian, and but at that point, I didn't make that connection yet, right? So I met this guy, nice kid, in recovery as well, right? And got to my first relationship clean. Um, which again, all those hormones and that excitement, right? And it fills up a cup, right? But it's not, or I call it a void. But if we want to use like a cup reference, it's not water. It looks like water, it tastes like water, but it's not water, right? Um, or it's water without the like electrolytes, and so anything that feels good, I want more of, right? It becomes a center of attention. Fitness, good friends, community, work, being of service, Netflix, right? Donuts, like anything and everything that feels good at the moment. And you should want more of things that feel good, right? But so that definitely was a distraction. But, moving on with that, I also wasn't living within my true self and authentic self in terms of my sexual identity, right? So I ended up getting a job at a treatment center, right? And I was going to meetings as part of 12-step fellowship. And I, it just felt good, like felt good, right? I didn't have the dreams that I do today, right? And kind of like the guy that, what's his name? The one that you mentioned?
Calip.
Caleb.
Yeah.
And what he said was extremely true and on point, right? We're powerless, right? Over anything that is mood or mind altering, Believe it or not, donuts are mood and mind altering. They are. So is coffee. Hence if you guys forgot, he's drinking 2 cups of coffee right now, 7:11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, but and wakes up at 4, which is incredible. Probably 3 sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked at a treatment center and I felt needed and I felt it good enough, right? And I got promoted, right? And then ego comes into play with that. And also like validity, right? I'm doing well in life, but I kind of like settled, right? So whatever, I'm a big believer of you can become who you hang with, right? It's a decision. Because if you don't want to become who you hang with, then you go hang out with other people, right? But that tends to happen, and yeah, so I was just going to meetings. I was dating the guy. I was working on myself. I stayed clean for about 4.5 years in the Poconos. The relationship started going south, right? So as is my stress and my emotions and my mental health, but I'm like feeling this feeling of being needed elsewhere at work. So I just dive into work, right? And I genuinely wanted to give what I had to other people. Like if I could just bottle it up, right, in a very high pH electrolyte drink and give it to somebody, all they have to do is drink it and they can be clean and sober, right? I would. And that's just not how it works. So I kind of stopped taking care of self and focused on others. And it was genuine, but it was also filling a void, right? It was taking me away from me. I was going through hard things with the boyfriend. He cheated. I'm gay. I don't know what's going on. My world is like super confused. And the only thing that makes sense is helping somebody else in recovery, but not at the, at what cost, right? So it was at a pretty high cost. And, we ended up breaking up. I ended up exploring my sexuality. I came out, started dating somebody. And, long story short, I got caught up with trying to help somebody get clean outside of my job, right? To the point where they were living with me. I'm 22 years old now with 4.5 years clean, driving to work at a drug and alcohol rehab with heroin in my car because I don't want her to have a drug dealer at my house and, something bad happened, right? While she was on house arrest. You can't make this up. It was just like as messy as it can get, right? And that's like my MO. I get my hands in some shit that's either like badass and cool and with people that have the same mindset, right? With so many opportunities for growth and to be of service and community, or like really dangerous stuff, right? For my mental health and people around me. And so I was trying to control her habit, and after 6 months of being around that, I said, give me the needle. And I shot up, right? And I relapsed. So it's 4.5 years. I'm 22 now, shooting heroin in my apartment with my girlfriend at the time. And, I OD'd the second day and it scared the shit out of me. I went back to a meeting. I said, I relapsed. I resigned from my job. I had two jobs, one at the halfway house that I went to and graduated from, and one at a treatment center. And I just didn't feel right. I said, listen, I used. So I have to resign. Right. So I got a job with this insurance company. I was painting, but I couldn't stop using. Right. And that's where like the powerlessness comes in. And in one way I can kind of like relate it to people who don't have the experience of, becoming addicted to drugs or alcohol or feeling that powerlessness is kind of like being in a toxic relationship. Like you have to get out, right? But you just can't get out. You always keep going back, or vice versa, right? And you're just stuck in this cycle. And you feel so helpless and powerless. And, and I've been at those as well. And it's just like, why am I doing this? Like, what the fuck is wrong with me, right? And that's where those limiting beliefs, right? It's like the blame. Also, the victim comes into play, whether like you want to believe it or not, right? And once you kind of realize there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just a human, right? And I got caught up in drugs, right? And there's a way out, and I've seen a way out. So like my friend says, you have 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself, and then you get your ass up, and we try and find the solution, you know. And so I really try to live by that today. Sometimes 24 becomes 36, especially if it's a time of the month. Sorry, Joe. But uh, but yeah, man, I mean, that's life, and that's being a human. It's just hard. I think it's valid when things happen to us to be sad, and you're allowed to have to feel feelings over it. But also we have the opportunity and choice to do the hard thing and not sit in our shit, and kind of try to find the solution. So I couldn't stop using within a month, right? I started, maybe I'm not going to say that, just not to incriminate myself, yeah. I started doing some things, and no, but I didn't have a job at this point, right? My ex ended up in jail. I'm trying to go visit her. I lost my car at this point. These guys that I was getting high with, and these drug dealers, I guess I could say that, right? were lending me a car to go visit her every Tuesday. Right now, this is where like the codependent addict in me is. And I was like, while I'm shooting heroin and cocaine, I'm like, I'm a woman of my word. I'm going to show up every Tuesday to go visit her in prison. Right. Which, like, why don't I just be a woman of my word and get clean? You know what I mean? I'm worried about myself and not have a drug dealer give me a car, go drive 3 hours. Right. And so it was like July 4th weekend, and it was almost impossible to get a car. We finally rented a car. And the guy was like, it's not a good idea. And I said, I don't care, I'm going. Right. And that's where that mindset of like, if I have to walk to York County from the Poconos to get there, I'm going to get there. Right. And so I got there. I didn't walk, I drove. And I was up for a bunch of days. I didn't have any sleep. I was exhausted. I was scared to, shoot heroin because I didn't want to get even more tired driving, but I was starting to get sick and withdraw. And I was trying to, do uppers to stay up, and just nothing was working. And I went to visit her, and when I left, I got pulled over, and I got arrested, and I got a possession charge, and they put me in prison with her because I was in that county. Right. So I was in York County prison for 3 months ish, 2.5 months. You can't look it up because it's expunged, by the way. So I don't know the time. I can call and ask, but I'm not sure. But I do remember, I was just like, fuck, you know what I mean? And I had a moment of like humility, because in my head, I was like, I know what to do. I had 4.5 years clean. I could get clean. Right. And I walked in there again, I felt powerless. I was like, how did I get here? And I'm like detoxing in a jail cell, by myself on the floor, sweating my ass off. And she ended up being there for 6 months. And I was there obviously for 2 to 3. And I got into a fight verbally, right? And they put me in solitary confinement. And when I was there, that's when really like my mental kind of hit the fan. And I was like, I'm either going to die from doing what I'm doing, right? Like I had a moment of clarity, right? And I think those moments are important, but those moments, when you have those moments, I think it's very important to take action pretty soon thereafter. And it's kind of hard to do when you're 23 and in jail, But I did have the moment, and I was like, I either get my life together or I die. There's no in between, right? And then my mom came offered to bail me out. And she said, we're going to send you to Texas or somewhere fucking far away for a year. And if you're agree to do that, I'll bail you out. And I said, no, I'm good. Right. Because I wanted to stay close to the girl to make sure she's taken care of. Right. And again, powerlessness over the relationship, over like anything outside of myself that made me feel good enough. And that is being needed. Right. The minute I realized I never wanted to be doing the drug, I never enjoyed it. It wasn't a part, it was me locked in the bathroom for 6 hours a day, And I got out and I put myself in a recovery house. And then for the next like year and a half, I couldn't put together more than 30, 60, 90 days tops, and it just, the progression of it got worse. Like your friend said, it just, all my nevers came true. I'm never going to put a needle in my arm, came true when it was 4.5 years clean, right? I'm never going to sell drugs, came true, jail, all that shit, right? So that aspect of it, right? Even with the moment of clarity when I got out, I used before I put myself in a recovery house because I just didn't know what else to do.
Well, I have this thought that I can't help but shake, and I think it holds true for everyone. And hearing your story, it sounds as if what I'm about to say is especially true for people who have been in your shoes, which is we get to choose the environment we put ourselves in. You know, barring, being in prison or solitary confinement, which I cannot even imagine, by the way, what that's like. But for the most part, we get to choose our environment. And then our environment shapes us. So we choose this thing, and then that thing changes us. And in that way, we do have the choice. But after we make that choice, we're influenced in a big way by what's around us. And it sounds like you choosing your environment is so, so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, choosing the environment and then when you're getting influenced by the environment, to me is also like you have a drink or two and then your behavior changes, right? Or you're in an environment where they're eating healthy and your behavior changes, right? Your body changes, your mood changes. Um, so if you're not aware of those changes, you can get stuck in that environment, you know? But I do believe in making that decision. And when you're using drugs, it's not really a choice once you're under the influence, right? Um, and there's the only other way, again, other than like the toxic relationship, is I don't know if anybody listening has an experience with this, but I remember during the pandemic, I had all these snacks and I lived by myself. And I would buy these chips and I'd be like, all right, I'm only gonna have one serving and then I'm gonna go watch my show or do work. And I put it back in the cabinet. And then 20 minutes later I get back up and I grab it and I'm like, all right, just another handful. And then I throw it just like the pacifier, like in the highest shelf, right? And then 30 minutes later, I'm climbing on it to go get another handful, right? Yes, I'm making that decision, right? But I'm influenced by the food. You know what I mean? And the same thing with like the using. I mean, I don't know if, we should get into this, but I was involved with certain people, right, that were doing certain things to get money and in order for me to have a place to stay and a roof over my head, right? I had to engage in these certain behaviors, right? And quote unquote work. And I'll just say it, and I had to engage in sex work, right? And there was, me and my ex were both involved with that. And it became a thing where it's just like, this is what we have to do to survive. It's not something that I'm like, yeah, this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? At all, by any means. And we were kind of, we had a guy running us for quite some time. And then it got to the point where like we ended up getting away from that, but still doing it on our own. Right. And I don't want to say, I don't know if you want to call it brainwashing or what, but it was like we were taught that this is what we do, right? You go to work at Wawa or you do this and get more money, and being in that environment really, puts a toll on you, right? And it still shapes you and has a huge, huge influence on you. Even though like deep down, I still have this like knowing that this is not who I am. I'm that like little soccer player girl who like climbs on top of cabinets for pacifiers or chips or whatever, and does whatever she needs to do to like enjoy life, right? And meanwhile, I'm engaging in this type of work that's like goes against everything that I believe in, right? Everything that I was taught, all the experiences. Is this noise hurting us? No, okay. And all the, experience that I've gone through in recovery, I'm here like in a hotel room, getting high, doing what I have to do, right? And I don't even get to like control want to get out of it, right? So it's like, go do this. We'll stay outside, make sure you're okay, right? Come back. We'll feed you. You have a bed and you can get high so you're not withdrawing. And that was kind of what we did. Um, but I never wanted to do it, you know? And when I was able to kind of get out, I just remember having this, again, moment where I was just like, I was super sick. I couldn't find a way to get another one, right? So I couldn't even get to the fucking bodega to go steal a donut to go eat because I was throwing up over the toilet. I couldn't get $5 to go get it back. And I was just like, I can't fucking do this anymore. Not to mention my family didn't really talk to me for that year and a half. Um, and so I made a call and I was like, I need help. I want to go to treatment. Um, and I went to treatment. And even then I left after 2 weeks, right? To go help the girlfriend. It wasn't even my girlfriend at the time, you know? And the power that, you know, this addiction has over you is sickening, right? To the point of like, I don't even think that I'm hurting my family because they don't talk to me that much, right? Or like, I don't have any friends, so nobody cares. I'm just hurting myself, right? Which is so selfish to think in that way, you know? And 2 months later, I ended up coming back again. And then I came to Philly, right? And I've been here ever since. But that whole year and a half is, I don't talk about it that often because I'm so far removed from it right now. It's like 2015 into 16, 14 into 16. And now we're what, 2024. It's wild. So it's, you know, every time I talk about it, I'm like, holy shit, that was crazy. And I'm so fucking lucky to have had the opportunity to kind of walk away from that.
Yeah. I mean, Kim, like if somebody came across your social media, you in person, they took a class of yours, they worked with you, they interacted with you, whatever, you look the role, you push yourself hard, you're good to people. Um, you would never need to share any of this, right? Like, and to label yourself as an addict, a lesbian, whatever else you want to throw out there, right? Like, that's got to be hard, I imagine, to like, you know, take this facade that people would look at and be like, I want to look like her, I want to work with her, I want to be like her, and then you share all of this. How does that make you feel? Is that hard?
Well, now that you say that, I'm like, skirt. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, good.
So, you know, I think the experience of being able to like get through to somebody or have somebody feel safe just because they feel like, oh shit, she gets it. Or she seems less intimidating now that she shared her story, right? Or she can relate. Or, oh, it's not that easy for her, right? Sometimes we look at like, I look at other fitness people, right, that have a six pack, and I'm like, they can just eat whatever they want and look like that. I can't. I can't get those chips every hour, you know. But and I think in the moment something cool happens, right? So if somebody asks me to share, or they ask me a personal question, and I know them on a certain level, I think my gut or my soul either feels safe to share that or just doesn't. After I share it though, I do feel a little vulnerable, right? And a little naked. And I'm like, ooh, should have I said that? Are they gonna judge me? Right. And I'm able to take it back because you know, if they do, they do. It's out there. I do have a pretty good level, I think, of self-acceptance, which I think is like a daily thing that I have to work on, right? But a base level of like, I know I'm a good fucking human. I know I enjoy helping people, right? I know I'm here to do something cool, on this earth. I don't know what it is, but I just know it's supposed to be cool, right? So I'm gonna try and fucking do it. And it's my story. It's who I am, right? I know like today I try to keep my side of the street clean, right? Treat people well, not cause harm, create community and connections, right? Help others, um, and just kind of live my life, right? Because I shouldn't be here right now, right? Like the things I did, the people I was um, surrounded by, right? And I've had so many opportunities to get clean again and again and again. And I've been able to, with the help of like community, right? And the experience of like being pushed by my community environment to do hard things and and having the reference point of achieving those hard things and being okay. Like my world didn't shatter walking away from that hard relationship, right? Um, helps you develop this sense of self, like, all right, I'm not a piece of shit junkie, right? I'm not the stigma. I'm not weird because I'm a lesbian or because I wasn't born here or whatnot. But it definitely, even now, right? Like I'm sitting with my legs crossed. Before it was like this, like it feels vulnerable, right? But in the moment when I share it, if it comes out, I just believe that it's supposed to come out, right? And it's gonna hopefully touch somebody. I have a few pretty cool experiences where people have reached out to me on social media, knowing my story and asking for help, or how to help a loved one. And when that happens, it's worth it, you know.
I think it's such a beautiful thing. And the reason I asked that question is because I think we all have those labels, those parts of our stories, those pieces of the past that we hesitate to bring up because it's behind us or it feels like it's behind us or we don't want to show the world because people could judge us or look at us differently, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we gain power by sharing our story. I think we have the privilege of sharing the vulnerable pieces of us in the hopes that it'll reach someone who needs it. And I have no doubt that not only the people who have told you that it's been helpful for you to share your story or it's changed their life, and I'm sure there are so many of those, the people who don't reach out, right? I'm imagining and I'm betting there's so many more of those people who are inspired and encouraged who will just never tell you, but they are. And I just think it's such an awesome thing to like feel a little naked. And I think we should all do that a little bit more, proverbially, not maybe not literally, but like be naked a little bit more. I think that's
I
a
mean,
good.
I'm the naked window neighbor. I am. uh,
Mm.
so I do have to get honest about that. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's super important. And I think intimacy and connection is only like authentic connection is only created through vulnerability, right? So like being seen, which could be super uncomfortable, like super uncomfortable and super hard. And sometimes I've gotten backlash before, but for every, let's say, I don't think it's this big of a number, but let's just say 1,000 people are like judging me. They're like, oh, she's a junkie or she's this, whatever, right? I can't believe she did that. Um, if 5 people out of those 1,000 reached out and they're like, can you help me get my son in treatment? What should I do? How do I get clean? Who do I ask? I think I have a problem, right? They give me 10,000 people who want to talk shit, you know? Because it takes like one story, one message, one conversation that could change somebody's life, right? And it's changed mine over and over and over again. Every opportunity that I have to get clean and stay clean. Because even like staying clean, I've been through stuff where for me it's like really hard to feel big feelings, right? Rejection, relationships, anxiety, being overwhelmed. Mainly romantic relationships. I've struggled where that emotional pain like put me in fetal position, right? And I just don't want to feel anymore, and having vulnerable conversations with people about that in the moment takes a lot of power out of that negative emotion, right? And I'm like, I'm okay. The world is so much bigger than this like anger or fear or resentment or sadness, right? Or like grieving process. And there's so many people we can connect with. And I think like connection is like the antidote, right, to addiction, because we isolate, and once we feel connected, we feel good enough, we feel seen. We have an opportunity to actually like be whatever the fuck we want to be.
That's a great line. Connection is the antidote to addiction. Um, I mean, with that being said, is something you mentioned earlier on in the conversation was that it's a daily decision, right? You're making a daily decision to stay clean, to choose good things, to help people, to keep your side of the street clean, et cetera, et cetera. What's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose? And is it making that daily decision, or is there a different harder thing you've ever done on purpose?
I'm trying like to while I'm clean.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. So I would say just not pick up when I wanted to pick up, meaning use, right? In terms of like backing myself into a corner, right? Because I feel so powerless over toxic behaviors that I've been engaging in,
Mm.
relationship wise, heartbreak. That's usually it. It's heartbreak for me, right? uh, that, I'm just so angry and feel betrayed or hurt that my brain immediately goes to, I don't want to feel this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to get high, but it feels like that's the only option, right? And the hard decision there is not doing it.
Mm.
It's just sitting with those feelings for me. Some people are like, wow, that was a huge risk that you took starting a business, or that's such a risk, moving and walking away from that job. And, it feels like risky, but not even in my head. I'm not like, wow, taking a big risk. Let me make sure everything's lined up. I'm like, this looks like a good opportunity. Let me run it by a few people. And I believe it's going to work out, and if it doesn't, then I do something else. Right. So those are not necessarily hard for me, but what's hard for me is walking away from something that's important, setting boundaries, putting myself first, and not engaging in something that's going to cause myself any type of mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual harm just because I don't want to feel a big feeling. I think, external risks taken are wonderful. Go bungee jumping, go start a business, if you have to get a divorce, get a divorce. The emotional things like sitting with self at the end of the day and managing those emotions, that's what's difficult for me, and that's hard. But doing it is the growth, right? And that's where it's like, okay, if Joe can go through what he's going through and run a fucking mile every goddamn day, my back hurts just sitting here thinking about it, right? Then I can walk a mile every day, right? If Kim could get clean, I could go to the gym. You know what I mean? So seeing that, experiencing it, getting through it on my own, having somebody recognize that I got through it, not on my own, but like not picking up, right? Not using. It's almost like another little, like I'm thinking of like a battery, right? And those little lines that fill it up. So every experience is like, oh shit, there's another line. I could do this. Now I could do this. And then I go back down and my battery's fucking exhausted. and I'm all out. And then I have to make a choice to do the hard thing and plug it the fuck back in, or let it die, and then I'm just miserable all day, stuck in the corner, not knowing what to do.
And I hope part of what this podcast as a whole and episodes like this do for people is provide a little bit of that boost, right? There's going to be somebody who's going to wake up tomorrow, or who knows, right now is at the gym, on a run, about to do one of those things or something else, and they don't want to. And they hear your story and they think, okay, if Kim could do that, I could do this, right? And I think there's a bigger point there to be made, which is, we don't do any of this alone. Yes, like there's ownership that we all have to take over our own situations, but life is not supposed to be lived alone, right? It's hard enough as it is. I think community and connection and leaning on others for support is not only important but necessary if we want to achieve great things, or pursue our potential, or continue to just exist and hopefully thrive. And so part of this podcast is talking about the concept of endurance and what that means. And so I'm curious for you, Kim, when you hear the word endurance, what comes to mind for you?
Currently, because I'm training for high rocks, what comes to mind is being out of breath and in zone 5. But what endurance like really means to me is I think during doing hard things, like past your limiting beliefs, right? It's resilience and persistence and doing shit that you don't want to do, right? That's pretty much it. I don't want to go to a meeting every day. I don't want to wake up at 6. I don't want to train for high rocks 6 days a week. Sometimes I'm hurting, right? But I want the result. So I have to do the hard thing that I don't want to do to get the result. The more I do that, and the more that I see the result, then I start wanting to do that hard thing, and it's no longer hard. And then comes the next hard thing, right?
That's awesome that you said that, because it sparked something for me that I was meaning to bring up on an episode. I was listening to a conversation about a movie scene, and I forget what the movie was, but that's not important. And the scene that they were describing, though, involved a man who put out a candle with his 2 fingers. Like you lick your fingers and you just pinch the flame and it goes out. So he did that, and then someone else saw it and wanted to replicate that. So they tried. But when they did it, they pinched the flame and then pulled their hand back real quick and yelped and said, ouch, that hurt. And they went back to the first guy and they said, how did you do that without hurting yourself? And the first guy looked at the second guy and said, it hurt. I just don't mind the hurt. And, like I think a lot of people look for shortcuts, or they look for hacks, right? They look for ways around certain things. I don't think there are really any shortcuts or secrets or hacks in this life. I think the biggest quote unquote hack is learning to not mind the hurt. It's going to suck some days. You're not going to want to do it a lot of times. But if you want the end result, you have to be willing to show up even when you don't feel like it. And that's the superpower.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's the coffee or this conversation, but I'm ready to like run through a brick wall, and it's my bed.
I know, right? Yeah, no, I absolutely love that little conversation about the candle. I think that's dope.
So with that being said, Kim, there are people listening to this podcast. And as we get toward the end here, this is my favorite part, because people are going through all different kinds of things. Some people are struggling with addiction listening to this. Some people are not struggling with that, but they're going through their own hard thing. And if you could speak to those people who are struggling right now and they don't know where to go or what to do, and they just want to hear some encouragement, some guidance, and something from you, what would you say?
If you want it, it's right there. You know what I mean? It's a drug or a different lifestyle. It's literally an arm length away. You just got to make a phone call, right? And if you have nobody to call, but you're able to listen to this podcast, I'm sure Joe will put my Instagram on there. Message me, I'll answer. right? There's a bunch of 800 numbers that I can also give Joe, and he could probably post about an addiction hotlines. But there's always a way out, no matter what it is. If we're in a situation, if we're in anything, there's a way out, right? I'm in this phone room right now. I didn't just levitate here. I opened the door and I got in, right? So even if the door is heavy and I need somebody to help me open it to get out, I just got to pick up the phone. I think anybody who has the desire to stop using has the ability to stop using. I think anybody that has the desire to achieve something can do the hard thing to get there, with the right support system and community and connection.
There's this great quote from George Lucas who said, "We're all living in cages with the door wide open." And I think sometimes we get ourselves into these situations and it feels like there's no way out. And in reality, sometimes we have to open the door and walk out, or we need some help. But sometimes, a lot of times, the door is open. It's unlocked, right? We just have to choose to walk out, and it's okay to ask for help in that.
Yeah, it's never easy. If it was easy, then it would be a hard thing to do, right?
Yeah. So, Kim, if people do want to reach out, or they do want to connect or follow along with your journey, where's the best place for them to do that?
I would say my Instagram. Cool. So it's you can put that in a podcast, or
I'll link it in the description. Yeah,
cool.
That's good.
Yeah. Message me. I have a link tree where you can put in an inquiry or send me a little message as well. That would be the best way to reach me. And again, I do my best to answer everything in the requests or in my DMs, all the emails. So please feel free to reach out. Don't be shy. I'm an open book. So hopefully that makes you feel safe to be an open book as well, if need be.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the way you're vulnerable, the way you show up, and for this conversation, but for just who you are as a person, Kim, and feel really grateful to call you a friend. And I can't wait to see where life takes both of us from here.
Likewise. And thank you. And I'm super, super excited to be a part of Project Endure and been asked to be on this podcast. And if this is your first episode, I highly suggest listening to more. Joe is cool as shit. So
I didn't pay her to say that. I did not pay her to say that.
He didn't. He didn't pay me at all. I just think he's an incredible guy. And again, community is just a beautiful thing, and it's necessary. And the more people we have trying to do that, I think the better the world will be, even if it's on a small, intimate level.
Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate you.
Of course.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Endure podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.